Thanks for watching Enabling IT Modernization with Secure Adaptive Networks, presented by CenturyLink. I'm Francis Rose with the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network. In this special program, we'll cover how the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is creating a flexible architecture to drive interoperability, innovations on the horizon for network transformation, cloud computing, and more. Plus, where the Defense Department is applying artificial intelligence to secure those networks. IT leaders will join me from ODNI, CenturyLink, Perspective Labs, AFCEA, Signal Magazine, and Ciena Government Solutions. It's an important topic and a great lineup, so let's get started. Joining me first, Linnea Jones, Deputy Chief Information Officer of the Intelligence Community at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Cynthia Mendoza, Director of their Architecture and Integration Division, and David Young, Senior Vice President of Strategic Government at CenturyLink. Thanks all very much for joining me. Linnea, let's start with you. Tell me what your IT modernization agenda is right now in OCIO at ODNI.
Sure. So with the Intelligence Community Chief Information Office, what we do is we provide the framework, the architecture, the standards, and really a vision overall for the intelligence community agencies. There's 17 agencies and they vary greatly as far as size, scope, mission. And so one of our goals is to ensure that they're working together, the solutions are interoperable, that we're looking at enabling mission first and foremost, and to continue being successful in our operations.
Now, without getting into individual organizations, among those 17, how does the differing missions of each of those organizations affect the architecture they need, the infrastructure they need, and what they bring to you problem set-wise?
Sure. So within the agencies, of course, due to their nature, they specialize in different types of intelligence. So ranging from signals intelligence to human intelligence to geospatial intelligence, and it varies, right? So all space intelligence or all source intelligence. And so with that being the case, they have areas that they focus on, but it's about sharing data and information and working together. We want to be interoperable. We want to have solutions that we enable each other to be successful. On top of that, we are sharing with some of the other department agencies, if you would. So, for instance, in Department of Homeland Security or the Treasury Department, they also have IC organizations or organizations that focus on the more classified domains. And so we're working together. And of course, first and foremost, we have the services. So all of the services have representatives as well as part of the IC.
Cynthia, how does your role in working on architecture, infrastructure, integration, how does that fit into what Linnea is doing in the broader IT modernization effort?
Yes, so in the broader IT modernization effort, my role is shepherding the community. And what I mean by that is providing the leadership necessary to build trusted partnerships. Building those partnerships in an effort to drive and help us bring together mission outcomes, so guiding behaviors towards mission outcomes in a federated environment. So it's all about changing the culture so that we can meet mission effectiveness, those mission outcomes. So it's looking at the architecture, establishing the left and the right guardrails, looking at minimum standards, profiles, and specifications so that we can drive interoperability, to be able to drive intelligence integration, and of course the most important thing is improving our safeguarding posture. So in EPIC 2, we're looking at balancing the agency mission goals and objectives with the ICIE information environment, knowing that one size fits all is not the answer, but that balance so that we can create a scalable, flexible architecture so we can introduce new technologies so that we can keep up with the changing times. And at the end of the day, it's all about the mission, ensuring that decision makers and mission analysts have the decisions and information they need so that we can keep our country safe.
David, one of the themes that I hear from both of these leaders is interoperability. That, I imagine, is something that you're seeing your customers asking for all across government.
They sure are, Francis. I think I'm in a unique position from industry where I get to deal with every civilian agency, all the DoD and the intelligence community, and everybody has a little bit different story and what they're trying to do around IT modernization. And on top of that, the environment that I live in corporately has gone through pretty significant change over the years too. I work for CenturyLink, who's been an acquirer of other companies, and so we're putting Fortune 500 companies together with very much the same challenges that we see inside the government. Legacy systems from a long time ago, yesteryear, And we have all of the information. It's gaining access to that information that's really driving the change that we're seeing. And what we're doing is we're really working on our operational model and attacking it through that, and then applying technology to the operational model. And so when I think of modernization and what we're doing, it's really about courage and velocity. It's really about being able to make those decisions, drive to a vision, and then do it quickly is really important.
Is the quickly piece the courageous part that you're talking about, to be able to make a decision and get on a path with some sense of speed?
They tie together, right? It's the vision of leaders, like we're meeting today, to cast that vision and then put the plans in place, but then drive those plans with velocity, making sure we're at pace and not accepting long durations to achieve our goals.
You're both nodding enthusiastically as he's laying out that vision. What did you hear there that makes sense to you, or that runs is similar to what you're doing at ODNI?
Sure. So I would key in on the operational mission success, right? Because it's about getting results. That's what this is all about, putting all the pieces together to make the end product, if you will. And so completely agree, as Cynthia was talking as well, with our IC Information Technology Enterprise, the ISITE efforts. With that, there's several pillars or areas such as cybersecurity, data, the reference architectures, and all of that needs to work together. We need to bring those separate pieces together from the federated environments, from the multiple types of intelligence, from the backgrounds they experience, in order to make a finished product. So absolutely agree, it's about pushing the mission forward.
There's a lot more I would love to cover, but we're out of time. Linnea, Cynthia, and David, thanks all very much for joining me.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Up next, I'll shift focus from the steps ODNI is taking right now to modernize their IT architecture to cutting-edge research efforts. So keep it right here for more Enabling IT Modernization with Secure Adaptive Networks on the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network.
Enabling IT Modernization with Secure Adaptive Networks is brought to you by CenturyLink, your link to what's next. Learn more at CenturyLink.com.
So far, you've learned about some of the steps the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is taking to drive interoperability and collaborate more on mission needs. Now, two private sector pros talk innovation, network transformation, and more. I spoke with Perspective Labs Vice President Tony Bogovich and CenturyLink Vice President Scott Barnett at AFCEA's TechNet Cyber 2019 in Baltimore, Maryland. Tony, I'll start with you. Tell me what goes on in Perspective Labs. Tell me the kind of work that you're doing.
Absolutely, thanks for the question. Perspective Labs excels at creating innovative technologies and providing services that tackle really the most complicated and difficult communications and information challenges. We work in many broad areas, including analytics, cyber, cognitive technologies, artificial intelligence, of course, mobile networking and wireless. Given our lineage, which is Bell Labs, Bell Core, Telcordia, we work in the networking and network management space, so developing, monitoring, managing tools, working on next generation networking technologies like quantum networking, for example. And we like to endeavor to take these technologies and really have an impact out in the field.
How do you stay ahead of the innovation curve? How do you know what is over the horizon so that you can be prepared to deliver it to practitioners both in government and outside?
So we're always operating on the bleeding edge. And as an example, say with distributed denial of service defense, there are a number of capabilities out there, filtering capabilities, patch capabilities, if you will. But what we focus on is how to essentially ensure that the network is resilient, that the design of the network is resilient from like DDoS attacks. So with DARPA funding, for example, we created 3 technologies that one serve to maneuver around sort of like a moving target defense, if you will, such that it takes into account deceptive practices so that the attacker feels like they're successful, but meanwhile they're not. Other technologies within that portfolio, for example, is a dispersion component. So what that basically means is you have some very high value servers, for example, email servers, file servers, DNS servers, and now they're essentially a central loci. They're very centralized, and to the extent that you can disperse the information that's resonant within these servers, it's that much more difficult to attack. So for the attacker that's doing recon or ISR, there is this inability really to really identify these servers because they're now distributed. And a third technology within that portfolio is something we called endpoint defense and response. So given the DDoS attacks are both botnet-induced volumetric attacks as well as protocol and application-specific attacks. And with this latter technology, it really handles all 3, right? So the low volume attacks, if you will, the application or protocol specific attacks, they tend to be rely on malformed exchanges with protocols and whatnot, so it's very hard to detect. So we have high fidelity detectors and then in turn do mitigation on these servers in order to get around such.
So I was going to piggyback on that. One of the ways that we kind of stay ahead of the curve or look over the horizon is we spend a lot of time understanding what our customers need. What is their mission? What is the, how is that developing for them? What do they see over the horizon? And getting that feedback is really important.
And I imagine the partnerships with partners like him are important because there's the old buggy whip analogy. If you gave the customer exactly what the customer wanted, they'd have a nicer buggy whip, and it doesn't do anybody.
And you're right on it. It's very important, as we heard today from Admiral Norton, that industry gets together in a partnership alignment, and we bring solutions to the government or to DISA or to the Department of Defense that they can use in their mission.
That's the question that I get asked from CIOs and other technology practitioners inside government more often than not. What do you see, meaning me, over the horizon, because they're so busy in the business of the day that they don't have time to think that far out. What do you see over the horizon when you're looking at this innovation landscape like Tony's talking about and all of that?
Well, and it's really upon us right now. It's the adaptive network. It's the ability to adapt your technology, your platform, your capability to their mission set. And whether that mission is oriented around healthcare or you're in theater with it, you've got to be able to almost, in every case, adapt to that mission in real time. And that's what they're expecting. So whether it's the warrior or the warfighter or the healthcare practitioner, you've got to be able to bring those tools to them, and they've got to be able to change them on the fly.
Up next, a look at some of the myths, realities, risks, and opportunities around the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning for cybersecurity. You're watching Enabling IT Modernization with Secure Adaptive Networks on the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network. Stay with us.
Enabling IT Modernization with Secure Adaptive Networks is brought to you by CenturyLink, your link to what's next. Learn more at CenturyLink.com.
The push for artificial intelligence solutions inside DoD is a real and coordinated effort. It's centered on the JAIC, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. Here you'll learn about some of the goals from AFCEA Cyber Committee co-chair John Gilligan and Signal Magazine executive editor George Seifers. I talked to them at AFCEA's TechNet Cyber 2019 in Baltimore. Tell me what you're seeing, what you're reporting on with the Defense Department using artificial intelligence in network defense.
Okay, yeah, artificial intelligence is already proving to be very useful in the cyber realm. I talked to a young Army specialist last year who works for NSA. He's a hacker for NSA. And so he's in the cyber fight day after day, dealing with attacks from Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, all over the world. And he was talking about how important it is, how important AI is, or automation is, in dealing with the rapid pace of these attacks. That being said, I'm not sure anybody really knows yet exactly where AI is going or how useful it's going to prove to be or how it will be used in the future. We just recently ran a contributed article from someone at Dell Corporation. It was a commentary piece. And he was pointing out that there have been a lot of requests for information coming out of the military recently regarding AI, not just for cyber, but for a wide array of missions. And he made the point that all of these RFIs coming out is an indication that this is something that the Defense Department is just beginning to get its arms around and study and try to figure out where it's going. And then just last week, late last week, there was a report from a NATO committee saying that they don't yet have the architecture that they need to use artificial intelligence agents on the network. And so that's just another indicator that we're just in the very beginnings of this, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, see where it goes in the future.
John, you and your cyber committee are working on some research in this area. What are you learning so far, and what's the rollout look like?
Yeah, Francis, I think as George said, what we're seeing is there's a lot of enthusiasm. We're in the nascent phase, so we're learning a lot. I think that the good news is that the technology is maturing and that the artificial intelligence has been around for many decades. But I think the maturing of the tools, the languages, the ability to process the information in a more rapid fashion has given great optimism that we're going to be able to make rapid progress. So I think as an example, when you just look at the speed with which the automation of automobile driving has progressed. So 5 years ago, if somebody had told you that you'd be able to basically take a car and drive it across country without the assist of a driver, you would say that's just not possible. Well, we're doing it now, and the technology is getting better and better. So in the Cyber Committee, our focus is really on cybersecurity. So we're looking at both AI, machine language, learning from a offensive standpoint and from a defensive standpoint. And so right now, one of our big focus areas is to put together a conference that we're going to hold in June 12th at the Perspecta Center. It's going to be a classified conference, and it's going to look at the range of AI, ML activities with regard to cybersecurity. So look at, from a defensive standpoint, what are the opportunities for AI, ML in helping us get over the hump in making significant progress in defensive cybersecurity. From an offensive standpoint, and we know that there are organizations that are already using AI, ML for offensive purposes. What are the opportunities? What are some of the issues? Looking at the interplay between offensive and defensive. I think so we're quite optimistic. We've got a great panel of speakers and keynotes. This will allow us, and it's a small audience, about 200, so it'll allow the audience to be fairly intimate in asking questions from the panelists. And so we're looking at it as a way to kind of bring the community together. Our end result is we're hoping then to be able to develop a summary, where the summary then will help guide and provide some recommendations. Where do we think the government should be going? As George said, there are a lot of RFIs, RFPs coming out. Where do we think is the right emphasis, in particular in cybersecurity? What should industry do? What are some of the risks? Should we take some of this technology and make it more sensitive, so that it's not accessible to adversaries, et cetera? So that's a summary of what we've been looking at.
George, who's kind of overseeing that line of RFIs and RFPs that you talked about? Is it the traditional provider, the traditional contracting organizations that we have seen inside DoD, or is this coming from a new kind of a new governance structure?
To a large extent, it's the traditional organizations that you've seen. Historically, the military services and other agencies in the Defense Department have had a lot of latitude in what they develop, what technologies they develop, or what systems they procure. But the Defense Department has just recently developed or instituted the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center just to help coordinate efforts, to share lessons learned and share information. That's not something that the military has always been real good about doing. Back in the 1990s, there might have been different divisions within a military lab that didn't know what the other divisions within the same lab were working on. That's largely not the case anymore, and so like I said, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, or the JAIC, will help to facilitate that cooperation.
Up next, it's a phrase you hear more and more often, but what's the real meaning of zero trust networks? More enabling IT modernization with secure adaptive networks right after this.
Enabling IT modernization with secure adaptive networks is brought to you by CenturyLink, your link to what's next. Learn more at CenturyLink.com.
So far, you've heard from experts at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, CenturyLink, Perspective Labs, and AFCEA's Cyber Committee about what's cutting edge right now and what's just over the horizon for secure adaptive networks. Now let's take a look at some solutions in the marketplace. Steve Opferman is Senior Director of Innovation at CenturyLink. James Westorp is Chief Technologist at Ciena Government Solutions. I talked to them at AFCEA's TechNet Cyber 2019 in Baltimore. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining me. Jim, I want to start with you. Define what a zero trust network is.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and one that actually the market and all the providers, even the network providers, have been working on for some time now. It's really an architecture and a philosophy that, as the name implies, really takes the trust out of the network. Historically, when networks were built, once you get past the first couple of moats or the first couple of firewalls, you were basically in and you were free to move about the network as you could. But that leaves a lot of openings. So today more and more networks are being designed with security throughout, and with a number of different controls that allow you to segment the network, to make sure that people who have access to the network, whether it's from outside your portal or within, are vetted and for security purposes, and make sure that they have the proper authentications and certificates. So it's really about this whole philosophy of not trusting anybody on the network, and making sure that whoever they are, you know who they are, you know where they are, and you know the privileges that they're supposed to have, and you can adapt the security controls of the network to account for that.
I want to come back to a bunch of the things that you laid out there, but Jim used the word infrastructure, and I wonder what the state of the art is as far as infrastructure as a service. A lot of the military services have talked about using it, some civilian agencies too. How far along are they getting? Or are they just kind of still in the talking about it, thinking about it phase?
Yeah, it's a remarkable marketplace. Estimates are over the next 5 years, we're going to experience about 27% compound annual growth rate, leading up to about $150 billion marketplace. That's predicated primarily on the desire of, at least in the commercial space, to see infrastructure move out of on-prem into the cloud. Now, not all activity is supported by that, right? So hybrid cloud and private infrastructure is expected to occur. We're also seeing a remarkable explosion in private and public cloud management. That That space represents an opportunity for users to move workloads across both the private and public domains seamlessly. So from an infrastructure perspective, really a remarkable place to be at the moment.
What is happening encryption-wise? This was a huge discussion right after the OPM breach. Everybody in Congress said we should encrypt everything. In a zero trust environment, as you described earlier, Jim, what's encryption even look like now, and how important is it today?
Yeah, encryption is as important in a zero trust, if not more so environment than it has been before. And really it's important to have encryption at all the different layers of the network. So there's not one kind of encryption that fits all, or if you just do this one thing, you've got it. You need to cover data at rest, you need to cover data in flight, you need to cover even encryption of data while it's in compute, et cetera. So you need to cover it across the board. As an infrastructure provider, for Ciena's perspective and how we help companies like CenturyLink build their networks. So we're primarily a data in flight play as optical transport, and we have a couple of different high-speed encryptors that we offer as part of the service, which you can turn up. So we've designed encryption in such a way as that it's transparent. It's pretty much high speed. It operates at 10 gig or 100 gig, moving to 200 and 400 gig, and provides basically minimal latency. We kind of call it a bump on the wire, which means you really can't tell it's there, but it is providing security primarily of the fiber infrastructure itself. So when we talked about zero trust, right? The network itself doesn't trust the people who are on it, but even the people who are riding the network don't necessarily want to be able to or have to trust the network itself. So you want to have encryption for both your users and the network itself, and we do provide high-speed infrastructure-based encryption that you can build the network itself out of.
Steve, Jim talks about the different types of encryption and when it's necessary, different uses and so on. When you described infrastructure a minute ago, how should organizations be thinking about building infrastructure when they are thinking about blockchain, but they're not necessarily using it today? They don't know what their artificial intelligence posture might be a year from now or 5 years from now. How do all those emerging technology elements play into the way that someone should think about an infrastructure development?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. As infrastructure really is the basis for where the networks are going in the future, we're seeing a significant movement towards virtualization, without question. And as you look at infrastructure, that's obviously where that virtualization is going to occur. And whether it's in the cloud, or it's on-prem, or it's a combination of both. We talked a moment ago about how we're moving those workloads across the infrastructure. As you look at new technologies and you put it in the context of cloud or hybrid cloud, you start to realize that things such as blockchain, or as we're at CenturyLink beginning to utilize in a very broad way, machine learning, what we're finding is that we're putting those frameworks, distributing them across the platforms, again, both private and public cloud. So when you think about infrastructure and you think about blockchain and some of the other technologies such as machine learning and AI, as you asked about, Francis, I think what you quickly come to realize is that the first layer has to be as commoditized as possible. So white label from the beginning. And as you start to build up, you start to have to think about how you're going to manage the workload, and then architecturally, how you're going to place those frameworks across that dispersed infrastructure.
And thank you for watching this special program, Enabling IT Modernization with Secure Adaptive Networks, presented by CenturyLink. For more information on the subject matter we talked about today, go to govmatters.tv/CenturyLink. For the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network, I'm Francis Rose.